Imagine this is a man that is coaching this team that does this. A male coach. All right? Because you're going to get Stephanie White defenders, Stephanie White truthers, the Stephanons, not QAnon, the Stephanons. They're going to go out there and all their infinite intelligence because they...
Stop right there. Rewind that moment. A head coach physically grabbing her star player's hand during a game and the player immediately yanking it away. That's not coaching. That's a relationship breakdown caught on camera. And if you think this is an isolated incident, you haven't been paying attention to what's happening in Indiana.
It's been our feeling for a while. There were times last year, there was plenty of times last year, where Stephanie White pretty much made her feelings known, and you could feel the aura of the fact that Stephanie White believed Kelsey Mitchell was the best player on this team. That last year, the clouds nearly aligned for Stephanie White. I also believe that playoff run, in part, may have been one of the worst things to happen long term, because I think it led Stephanie White to look in the direction of Caitlin Clark and go, that's not really the player that I am looking to build this team around. I want to build this player around Kelsey Mitchell.
Here's the situation developing in real time. Stephanie White took over the Indiana Fever with one mission: win a championship. But there's a growing belief that White doesn't see Caitlin Clark as the player to build that championship around. Instead, all signs point to Kelsey Mitchell being White's preferred franchise cornerstone. And that creates a massive problem when one player is selling out arenas and the other, talented as she is, was part of teams that couldn't crack 4,500 fans per game before Clark arrived. The numbers don't lie. Before Caitlin Clark, the Fever were drawing basement-level attendance. They had back-to-back #1 overall picks and still couldn't generate interest. Now they're averaging over 16,000 fans per game. That's not because of coaching philosophy or system changes. That's the Caitlin Clark effect.
I got to tell you, if we are not reaching a boiling point, I don't know where this is going. And somebody presented a question. We're going to play this, don't worry. Somebody said this: wouldn't it be crazy if Stephanie White convinces the retards? Oh, real donkey stuff 2.0. Very good. Wouldn't it be crazy if Stephanie White convinces the retards, Kelly and Amber, to trade Caitlin Clark because White thinks the team is better without her? That her system can win the Fever the championship with Kelsey Mitchell? Well, my thing would be Kelsey Mitchell was around for a while, right? She was around long enough to see this team get 2 consecutive #1 overall.
Watch this interaction again, because the body language tells the entire story. White reaches for Clark's hand, and Clark's reaction is immediate and visceral. She rips her hand away. No hesitation, no polite tolerance, just pure rejection of that physical contact. And look at the background. Kelly Kraskopf and Amber Cox sitting courtside, watching this unfold. They're seeing the same dysfunction everyone else is seeing. Now imagine if this were reversed. Imagine a male coach grabbing a female player's hand like that, and the player reacting with that level of obvious discomfort. The outrage would be instantaneous and justified. But because it's Stephanie White, there's a segment of people trying to convince you this is normal, that it happens all the time, that you're overreacting.
All right. She was also around for this stadium putting 4,500 people a game into it. If she's not careful, she may be around to see that again. Those ratings I went over, those tickets I went over last night, they're in the exact same spot. They hadn't even moved. It doesn't look like a ticket's been sold overnight. Not one. So I answered this. I quote tweeted it, and I said, if they allow this to happen, it would be the women's sports version of Babe Ruth.
Here's what makes this particularly alarming. This isn't happening in a vacuum. There's already documented video of Stephanie White refusing to praise Caitlin Clark when asked directly by reporters, not deflecting to team success, not spreading credit around, actually refusing to say positive things about the most dynamic player in the league when asked specifically about her by name. A reporter asks about Caitlin Clark's performance, and White finds a way to talk about literally anyone else. That's a pattern, and patterns reveal priorities. When a coach can't bring herself to publicly acknowledge her star player's excellence, that tells you where that player ranks in the coach's vision for the team.
The attendance, you can say this, 12,000 people just vanished every game. Is it my belief that Herb Simon and the Pacers organization will step in and clean house before they allow that to happen? I would think surely that will be the case. Now, whether or not Caitlin Clark requests a trade and decides she won't come off of that demand, and that better be the thing that Herb Simon and the Pacers don't wait for. Don't wait for Caitlin Clark to request a trade out of town. Hire NBA people before that happens.
Let's talk about what's really at stake here. Someone posed an interesting question. What if Stephanie White actually convinces management to trade Caitlin Clark? What if White genuinely believes her system can win a championship with Kelsey Mitchell as the centerpiece, and that Clark doesn't fit what she's trying to build? The response to that hypothetical is simple. It would be the women's sports equivalent of the Red Sox trading Babe Ruth. And we know how that story ended. Boston carried the curse of the Bambino for 86 years. Championships, playoff heartbreak, generations of suffering, all because they let the game's biggest star walk away. If the Fever trade Caitlin Clark, those 16,000 fans per game disappear overnight. The national television interest vanishes, the sold-out road arenas go back to normal attendance, and Indiana goes right back to being the afterthought franchise they were before Clark arrived, playing in front of 4,500 people who showed up out of obligation rather than excitement.
There. Yeah. Caitlin's like, hail to the no. Are you grabbing? Give me my hand back. Look. Woo! Wow. It's man. By the way, I wonder if the Fever understand. There are people out there.
Look at Caitlin's face in that moment. That's not mild annoyance. That's anger. That's a player who has reached her limit with how she's being treated. And the fact that this is happening publicly, on camera, during a game, tells you the private interactions are probably 10 times worse. People don't react that viscerally to a first offense. That's accumulated frustration boiling over. The comparison to other superstars is instructive here. Can you imagine Steve Kerr grabbing Steph Curry's hand like that? Can you picture Phil Jackson doing that to Michael Jordan? Eric Spoelstra to LeBron James? It doesn't happen because those coaches understood the dynamic. You can coach superstars hard, you can demand excellence, you can hold them accountable, but you don't treat them like children who need to be physically corralled.
Look, the best thing that happened to the Fever is they're playing a bunch of cupcakes right now. So there's going to be people out there that are going to be like, oh, look, they've won 4 of their last 5 against a bunch of players that ought to be mopping floors at a peep show. I mean, bagging groceries down at the Brookshires here in Texas. Tell me what you think.
Now here's the part that should terrify Fever management. The team is currently winning games, and people are using that as evidence that everything is fine. They've won 4 of their last 5. The system is working. White knows what she's doing. Stop creating drama where none exists. But look at who they're playing. These aren't quality opponents. These are bottom-tier teams that would struggle against a well-coached college squad. The Fever are beating up on lottery teams, and people are acting like White has figured something out. Wait until they face real competition. Wait until the pressure is on and the margin for error shrinks. That's when these relationship fractures become fatal.
It is something. Look, if everything was perfect and there wasn't a bunch of drama going on, blah, 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 and Stephanie White didn't have video where she absolutely could not squeeze out praise for the most dynamic player in the league, she cannot bring herself to say positive shit about when she's asked directly by name. I'm asking you as a reporter by name, talk about her. Nah, not going to do it. Under the circumstances of what is going on right now, this is a big damn deal. You won't talk me out of that. Tell me what you think. Peace, I'm out.
Here's what needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast. Herb Simon and the Pacers organization need to step in before this reaches the point of no return. Don't wait for Caitlin Clark to request a trade. Don't wait for this to become a public standoff where somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. Act now while there's still time to fix it. Bring in NBA-level coaching. People have suggested Mark Jackson, who has experience handling superstar personalities and media pressure. Others have mentioned Bill Lammerbeer, who's been in the WNBA long enough to command respect, but doesn't carry the baggage of league politics. The specific name matters less than the principle. Get someone from outside the WNBA's insular culture who will prioritize basketball over agendas. Because here's the reality that nobody wants to say out loud. Stephanie White is a respected figure in women's basketball. She's a former player, a champion, someone who's paid her dues. But none of that matters if she can't maximize the talent of a generational player. And right now, all the evidence suggests she either can't or won't build around Caitlin Clark the way this situation demands. The hand-grabbing incident isn't the problem, it's a symptom. The problem is a fundamental misalignment between what the coach wants and what the franchise needs. White wants to prove her system can win with her preferred players. The franchise needs to build around the player who's driving revenue, ratings, and relevance. Think about the business side for a moment. The Fever went from irrelevant to must-see TV in one season. Their road games became events in opposing arenas. Their merchandise sales exploded. National media started covering them regularly. And all of that traces directly back to Caitlin Clark. Not the system, not the coaching philosophy, not Kelsey Mitchell, talented as she is. Caitlin Clark is the revenue driver. Now imagine explaining to Herb Simon that you want to move on from the player responsible for that transformation because the coach prefers a different approach. Imagine trying to sell tickets next season after trading away the only player casual fans can name. Imagine the PR nightmare of that press conference. The comparison to Babe Ruth isn't hyperbole, it's the perfect historical parallel. The Red Sox thought they could win without Ruth because they had other good players and a solid system. They were wrong for nearly a century. The Fever would be making the exact same mistake, just in a different era and a different sport. And here's the thing about curses in sports. They're not supernatural. They're the compounding consequences of catastrophically bad decisions. The Red Sox curse wasn't magic. It was the organizational trauma of knowing they'd traded away the greatest player in baseball history for essentially nothing. That knowledge poisoned every subsequent decision, every close game, every near miss. The curse was psychological, but the pain was real. If the Fever trade Caitlin Clark, they'll create their own curse. Every empty seat will be a reminder. Every loss will be scrutinized through the lens of that decision. Every highlight Clark produces for another team will be a dagger. And unlike the Red Sox, who at least got some productive years out of their roster before the full weight of the Ruth trade became clear, the Fever would feel it immediately. The solution is obvious. Stephanie White needs to either adjust her approach to feature Caitlin Clark as the undisputed centerpiece, or the Fever need to find a coach who will. There's no middle ground here. You don't compromise with generational talent. You don't ask once-in-a-decade players to fit into your system. You build the system around them and maximize every ounce of their ability. So the question for Fever management is simple. Are you running a basketball team or a coaching laboratory? Because if this is about winning championships and maximizing revenue, the answer is obvious. Build around Clark. Yesterday. But if this is about validating Stephanie White's vision and proving her system works, then prepare for empty arenas and irrelevance, because that's where this current path leads. The hand grab moment is going to be studied like the Zapruder film. People are already breaking down every frame, analyzing body language, reading facial expressions. That's the level of scrutiny on this organization right now. Every interaction between White and Clark will be dissected. Every lineup decision will be questioned. Every loss will be blamed on this dysfunction. And you know what the worst part is? This was completely avoidable. Caitlin Clark isn't a difficult personality. She's not demanding trades or causing locker room problems. She just wants to play basketball and win games. The dysfunction is coming from the coaching staff's inability or unwillingness to embrace what they have. So here's where we are. The Indiana Fever have the biggest star in women's basketball, a player who's transformed their franchise from afterthought to centerpiece, and their head coach appears to wish she could build around someone else. That's not sustainable. Something has to give. And if Fever management lets that something be Caitlin Clark's departure, they'll deserve every empty seat and every brutal loss that follows. What do you think happens next? Does Stephanie White adjust her approach, or does this keep escalating until somebody's gone? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want to see more coverage of this developing situation, hit that subscribe button because this story is far from over.